Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the last reading of the CalArts and Program reading series, the fall of 2025. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are standing on the land of the Fernandinho Tapatio Band of Mission Indians. As I've been researching it, I have learned that the Tapatio can be traced back 1,500 years in San Fernando Valley, what we now call the San Fernando Valley, the Santa Clarita Valley, and the Antelope Valley. Also learned that they are among the many native tribes that are not recognized by the federal government. So their continued survival defies the incredible limitations placed against them. In reading further, I learned that it is particularly the tribes whose land was on watersheds and water resources that have the most problems getting this federal recognition. As we speak, they are still trying to get it. So tonight's guest is Christopher Soto. I've learned in my life, in my short life, I've known a lot of powerful activists and a lot of brilliant poets, but I have found that the two do not so often intertwine. But by putting punk, lyricism, abolitionism, queerness, anti-colonialism, homelessness, humor, anti-racism, and social justice into conversation with each other, Christopher Soto presents us with a radically energized practice. He's the editor of Nepantla, an anthology of queer poets of color, the author of a brilliant first chapbook, Sad Girl Poems, and of a forthcoming first book from Copperton Press, from which he will be reading tonight. He's also the co-founder of the Undocupoets Campaign and the Writers for Migrant Justice. To introduce him, I'd like to read you the opening passage of Sad Girl Poems. If you recognize it, it's because it has been quoted in many places. I always wanted to be a sad white girl. I wanted to be sad like Lana Del Rey. I wanted a sadness so universal it moved everyone to tears, a sadness everyone could relate to. I want a summertime sadness. Yes, I've experienced that before. I know where that's coming from. Lately, I've been thinking about the contextualization of POC sadness. My sadness is viewed in terms of everything surrounding it. My sadness is about domestic violence, homelessness, gender dysphoria, intergenerational trauma passed down from the Salvadorian Civil War, etc., etc. My sadness is something to observe, consume, sympathize with, but not empathize with, not to mobilize for. Most people do not know how to interact with my sadness. My sadness is so multifaceted, it speaks 20 languages. Welcome, Christopher. Carlos is your friend. Carlos is welcome.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for hosting me, and thanks everyone for choosing to spend your night and your life in poetry. If it's okay, I'll take off my mask while I'm reading. All right, so let's get this set up really quick and then we'll dive into poems. I remember when I first started reading publicly, I was always so jealous of spoken word and performance-based poets. Because I was like, damn, these bitches know how to work a stage. But it's interesting because academia so often dismisses oral forms of literature, poetry, storytelling. But I feel like when I'm on the stage like this, I always have such reverence for that craft because oral literatures are made oftentimes with, the ear and the performance in mind. But this is page shit, so sorry for you. All right, I want to I want to open up with 2 poems just to get my some honey on the vocal cords. This first one is from Miguel James, and he's from somewhere in South America. I forget what, but it's a translation of his poem called Against the Police. I'll read for maybe 20, 30 minutes. We'll have Q&A, and then we'll go party. My entire revoir is against the police. If I write a love poem, it's against the police. And if I sing the nakedness of bodies, I sing against the police. And if I make this earth a metaphor, I make it a metaphor against the police. If I speak wildly in my poems, I speak against the police. And if I manage to create a poem, it's against the police. If I haven't written a single word, verse, a stanza that isn't against the police, I haven't written a single word, a verse, a stanza that isn't against the police. All my prose is against the police. My entire revoir, including this poem, my whole revoir is against the police. I think I just changed my mind literally 20 seconds ago. I want to close with Baraka. So right now, I am moving into my debut poetry collection being released. It's coming out in May 2021. The title and cover are going to be announced within the next week, so spoiler, I'll do it here. It's Diaries of a Terrorist is the title. I was fighting with Copper Canyon Press to get Abolish the Police as a subtitle. I lost, but I got it on the back cover. Publishing and editors did. Yay. And the front cover is from this queer Latino Mexican American photographer named Fabian Guerrero. And the photo was taken in Mexico City when you see that. I love his work, you should look into it. So the closing poem, how the manuscript is organized is I start in a geographical space that's small. I start in the neighborhood, and that's section 1. Section 2, I expand to look at the region, Southern California. Section 3, I expand to look globally and talk globally about policing, so tying American policing to Palestinian liberation movements, tying it to conversations about migration and migrant detention. And then section 4, I wanted to go a little bit more, philosophical and talk about conceptions of violence and to start thinking about non-carceral alternatives to addressing violence. So this 4th section addresses violence by thinking about 3 different ways of being hit and how these 3 different ways of being hit have different interactions. So one of the ways is through boxing, one is through domestic violence, and the other is through kink. So the title of this poem is called Then a Hammer Realized Its Life Purpose. Round 1. We kept envisioning our sister's spine on the chain link fence. We kept trying to understand words like violence and freedom. Why did a fist choose to fly? In junior high, we saw her fight. The veins in her neck were 2 rivers diverging. Our body was a sandbag and screaming, hit that fucker. There she was, spying on diamonds of the chain link fence. We were held back, our sister, her hair pulled from its galaxy. We can hardly write our sister's pain in the poem, our sister's pain and ours screaming, hit that fucker in our mouth. We swear there was a black hole that swallowed every sound we made. Let us go, let her go, let go of the cell phones in their hands, recording such an ugly moment. The camera lens blinked its eye and lost the staring contest. How could they film this? We couldn't even watch once, which beckons the question of astronomy in literature. How does one dispute the image without it becoming a commodity or trigger? A crowd was around her in a half circle, the shape of an orange slice floating in a glass of beer. The crowd seemed like it was 5, rows or 6 rows or 700 rows deep. We were sinking in quicksand. We were swimming forward to help her. Our sister grabbed the other girl's hair in her palm, a small planet for suffering. This girl's shirt and bra being torn off by our sister. Let them fight, the boys said to us, teenage boys excited at the sight of gangsters on ice skates. For teenage boys, the fight was a sexual experience, extension of their desires. We grabbed a skateboard nearby by the bearings and swung it to the ground. We said, move the fuck away or we'll smash your head open. Because we're feminists, we never smash open the head of a young girl. Because we believe in our sister, we'd abandon our name. We'd become whatever animal she didn't ask us to become. Round 2. Sitting on the couch in our therapist's office, there was a coffee table between us, blocking the connection. Mostly, our memory goes blank. It feels like looking at the sun, big black blotches where there should be bright. Sometimes it feels better for the image to be disappeared, we told our therapist. Our sister was on the phone. We could feel her shaking through the line. A plane in turbulence. It passed us. Electronically, we started shaking too. Our sister went to visit father, who was rarely a father. She saw him hit the dogs, his hand raised. Again, his hand raised. He must have looked so big to the dogs. We imagined a howl, a limp in the leg, their tucked tails, worried for a way, out of the room, rushing through his legs, running away, no roof to sleep under but his, no master but him, mister, no walking without his collar, his hand raised, again, his hand raised. She was watching. One dog was named Bea, beautiful. The other dog was named Luna, moon, the beautiful moon, sleeping outside, shivering in the shitty shed. Our sister called, because we knew the metaphor. We were the dog, hiding from father again. The couch with its broken legs had been taken to the doctors. But this time she spoke up. Don't ever hit the dogs, you asshole. And the smallest infraction can bring us back to childhood. He doesn't understand why. Mom slept with a suitcase beneath her bed. Mom would get all nervous when we were bones. The dogs weren't eating anymore. Our glass dogs broke from their glass leashes. Our father was in the yard, calling, Luna, Bea, Luna, Bea, beautiful moon, as if waiting for someone in the sky to call him back. Round 3. Yes, our body sometimes does crave it. The soft blue touch of a bruise beneath the sweater. This is the story of hands on us. Domestic violence to kink to boxing. We were a front of firing squad. We were a fire, a flame extinguished. We were flamboyant, our buoyancy burst a boy ago. We began boxing with other survivors to let go of anger, as if anger were a little red balloon zigzagging into the stratosphere. Maybe anger is what happens when love feels threatened. And we loved ourselves so much we used to punch our ribs before sleep, trying to make our skin tougher, so we wouldn't feel father punching us. Jab, lead hook, cross, duck, jab. On that first boxing class, our arms flurried against the bag. The instructor said, imagine your enemy. And tears were track runners down our face. A little lake fell to the ground. We dove in. An encyclopedia of motherfuckers appeared on the bag, and we beat them all. Lead uppercut, back uppercut, slip, cross. We walked as if nobody could fuck with us. We boxed because therapy and writing and forgetting wasn't enough. Boxing because sometimes it feels like no, it's just a sound that one makes to warn of danger. Like a train whistling or a flashing red light. No couldn't stop the wreckage. as much as we wish it would. No, no, no. Our fists were swinging against the bag, as if that could have stopped him. Lead hook, back hook, duck, keep your guard up. We imagined our enemies feet fast across the floor, legs flashed from one position to the next, surprised by the graceful flow in a boxer's body. Before yanking off drenched gloves, untying the wraps to see the blue-red between our webs, the peeled knuckles, we asked our friend what enemy he was punching. He said he was fighting bigotry and hate. He was fighting concepts, not people. In the locker room, he waited for us to undress before showing his nipples. We contemplated Mexican brutalism and Luis Barron in a luxury gym, because that has become our life. We walked out that door and pretended to box on the street. We laughed and jabbed at one another, taught one another about form, not the guzzle or sonnet or triolet. He said, lift your elbow. You don't want the punch to land on your last two knuckles. For a moment we smelt big. For a moment we smelt too big to attack. We walked near the East River in Brooklyn, looking at downtown Manhattan. We asked for consent before gazing at the stars. We looked at the one World Trade Center, remembered what was there in our youth, Twin Towers. We remembered visiting the twins before they fell or were pushed over. Gray hot dog, water in the cart, catty corner. We thought if America, the biggest bully, wasn't immune to attack, then how could we ever think we're safe? Maybe in the aftermath, we have more in common with America than we want to admit. Maybe a boundary becomes a border when nobody's allowed to cross. Maybe we built walls so giant to keep everyone out. Maybe our mouth was a weapon we were willing to launch too readily. And mostly we were afraid of the people we've never met, which is to say, we see sunflowers in the eyes of a friend, sunflowers outside the kitchen sink, sinking into another thought during lunch break. We broke it down while drying dishes to Nina Simone, moaned over her interviews, believed every word she said when she said, freedom means to live with no fear. Round 4. For 3 years we didn't talk. Our mouth was a cave that had collapsed. The silence was never complete. There was always a heartbeat through the wall in the middle of midnight. Our sister was vomiting on her blouse, overdosing in the ambulance. What did she take? Maybe silence just means less than the loudest part of the room. Maybe police were the loudest, and so we didn't hear other solutions. For years, our suffering was so loud it was all we could hear. The adjacent room didn't exist. We couldn't hear our sister's breath. We couldn't understand that while we got beat by father, she was in the next room alone and listening. The sound of our bodies scrunched into a paper ball about to be tossed to the rim of the trash can. Our mother's voice, please stop, please leave him alone. We're doing it again in this poem. Our sister's still studying the other room with nobody listening, the silence amalgamating. We imagine that she bunkered under the bed sheets to escape the silence, that she hummed, then she plugged in her headphones and turned on the music. We imagine that she climbed onto the roof to look at the ethereal night or Etheridge. The window clinked open, her little steps on the shingles. Nobody noticed when she had left. She could have brought 20 gorillas to live in her bedroom. Nobody would have known. It would have still tasted like silence in there. Our sister heard our thudding next door for years. We must be acute in this obtuse memory. She heard the stapler thrown into the wall, every family photo covering holes he made. Maybe this is how she tried to survive. While we had our mother's protection, she had a bottle of gin.
Christopher, a little closer to the mic.
Okay.
Just got a message from the outside world.
Cool. Section 5, this is the last section of this poem. Our therapist said we have PTSD, and we want a bulldozer over us. The stars move so slowly. For the last 2 rounds, we've been knocked out. We don't want to fight anymore. We fought to end the death penalty at our day job, but we don't care who lives or dies tonight. Sorry. After domestic violence, I thought there would be me, but instead we found our teeth grounded to sugar. We still felt him everywhere. We tied 2 birds to our earrings, told our mind to fly away. We hunched across from our sister. We told her we don't want to write. We told her we can't relate to poets, to activists, to anyone. We told her we're done fitting into the bucket. We told her, Coach, take us out of the ring. Our days should be spent tying daisies into bracelets. Our days should be spent a lifetime with time. Our sister, she looked at us with such compassion, with such range that waterfalls began to pour from our ears. Her pupils told us, you're needed, you need to remember you're strong, you've been hit before, you need to get up, you can get up despite the ropes on our back. Our mother was still cheering, our friends were cheering, our God was cheering our God, our gauze on our hands, water squirted in our mouth. We shook out our arms, wiped the sweat with a towel. For the ones we loved, there was just enough to lift our head, to remember the city lights were never about us. It's the final round, and we whispered to ourselves, get the fuck up and fight. Thank you. So that one was written from the we pronoun, and the whole book is written from the we pronoun. I was thinking about, this whole book is hopefully a gift to the abolitionist movement, or contribution to the movement, so that we continue growing and having the conversations, moving towards the world that we want to create. But I think I wanted to decentralize the I, or decentralize the idea that police violence or domestic violence or whatever only happens to individuals and not communities. And so throughout the whole book, I use the we pronoun to bring this in as part of a community chorus. The only time that I have an I don't know if you caught it, but there was one line where I had an I, and I only have it once in the whole book. And it's a meditation after, like a retrospective after domestic violence, saying, I wish there would be me, or I thought there would be me. Because I think while going through domestic violence, then in the aftermath, I was like, all right, like you get out of this, and then you're gonna go back to being whoever you were before, and I didn't understand, no, you don't ever go back to who you were before. You go back to this new iteration of you. So that I is gone. And how do you navigate, or how do you deal with that? So I only appear in my debut book once. And then I had a small little head nod to Mary, so maybe that's Mary's ghost telling me to read this book in transition. So I'll read this poem in transition. So here's a Mary Baraka preface to a 20-volume suicide note. Folks know Mary? Oh yeah, good campus. Okay. Lately, I've become accustomed to the way the ground opens up and envelops me. Each time I go out to walk the dog, or the broad edge to the music the wind makes when I run for a bus. Things have come to that. And now, each night I count the stars, and each night I get the same numbers. And when they will not come to be counted, I count the holes they leave. Nobody sings anymore. And then last night I tiptoed up to my daughter's room and heard her talking to someone. And when I opened the door, there she was. When I opened the door, there was no one there. Only she on her knees, peeking into her own clasped hands. I haven't read those 2 poems in proximity to one another before, and that was actually really nice. I know you know Eileen, and I don't know if you know Eileen's shrug when they're done. That's all I got. And Eileen was my thesis advisor at NYU, and I realized that over the last 6 years I've adopted the shrug. And always done something. What else do you want? And it's a nice echo. I guess there's different ways in the poem and in the body that you get to echo your mentors or idols or whatever. Okay, so my work is really informed by, I guess, what I call a punk literary aesthetic, and then the punk's called punk. I identify as a retired punk as of now. But I think for me, part of a punk literary aesthetic is like an embrace of like the sexual political rhetoric, the sexually perverse, the grotesque, the anti-authoritarian, the use of like humor in ways that are so flippant they almost just might dismiss the seriousness or the gravity of the subjects that are being discussed. So I'll read some of these poems that are that are just fun for me. They're a little bit hard to hear, but I'll read them slow, and I just enjoy reading them. I think this is the first time I've read this one, so all right. Orgies for the elderly. Swayed by the world's ugliest models, and finally enjoying the mediocrity of myself, of ourselves. We sold our art for aristocracy, and some days we were so desperate for touch, breastfeeding mothers made us jealous. Should be more ashamed, we know. We lived our anus in the ugly and was looking back at us. How we shifted from desire to desire until there was no more wanting. Ghastly scared of being stuck like a blowfish in plastic rings. Do you know how to scare an octopus? Ask about its future. Memory swam by, a silver shark we didn't want to touch. We took out the trash. We took out ourselves. We got arthritis while jerking him off. Our dentures dropped to his pubes, and we drooled like a little dog. We came with our walker in a mountain of Viagra, and sucked until the slow celestial release. While Zapatistas sing their hymnos in Chiapas, we got life advice from pregnant teens. Only the salt for sugar daddies. Thursdays we knelt like a horse, braiding its hair in the cypress tree. Horses are unicorns that lost the war. Always next up in the poverty line. We watched our culture sell on the stock exchange, becoming recycled TV memories. Each cloud dreamt a solid form, to forever pray, to forever love gay collage boys, to forever pray beneath the Pope's glitter thong. I think when I'm a serious writer. This year I won an MEA, and I submitted like these poems that were like about being like slutty and gay and abolishing the police. And then they're like, the federal government would like to give you $20,000. It's just like, what are you talking about? Like, did you read the manuscript? And I think sometimes like I get a little bit worried that I'm like, wait, what am I doing wrong? All right, so this is another poem from the NEA packet. Thank you for the support. It's called barebacking the bar back. Someone needs to support the culture. We're his, retired slut, on food stamps forever, sniffing horse tranquilizer, seeing digital dreams. This sweet and cherry boy pussy is a great machine. Twice faggots chased down the nude avenue, stalked and photographed, buying burner phones, the cellophane sound of cyber threats, entropy, in the new brutal black midnight, public crying. We spoke literally. We lost obsidian and a job on the dark web. We were harassed, scissoring our femme queen, and he violent a bit nervously. The sky is a constellation of arrows. Something gold feathered, forgiveness, forgive us for speaking. We spoke, smelling like dog piss and disappointment. Everyone hurt, diamonds on the sand, hell's tempered climate compared to this life without you. So I'll maybe read, I think, 3 more short poems that more directly address policing migration. So some of these poems are direct translations of my lived experience, some are embodiment poems. I have poems that are like embodiment poems of like 200 women in India, and people were like, is that you? And I was like, I did not 200 women, though I would love to be. So here, I'll read this poem. I don't know if folks are reading Lucy Rockroyo, but I love State Illusion. And she was teaching at Columbia in an MFA program. She was teaching poetry. And she has like these really beautiful, like imagistic and syntactic leaps. And there's I think a kind of permission that some poets feel where they're like, I don't have to have anything like any form of like legislatable narrative within it. Like the reader will come to whatever conclusion the reader wants to come. And so sometimes they're really just like, let me harness my Lucy. And so this is kind of in those days where I was praying to her spirit. All right. Transgender cyborgs attack from JFK to LAX. We left our gender in Los Angeles. She was a cute muse with a full beard and a thick brown dick. We were traveling past metal detectors when security slobs started grabbing our genitals. If it's your job to grope strangers, then quit. Well, dear transportation agency losers, we love our hairy ass and a lace thong dildo in our carry-on bag. It isn't a weapon, we promise. When detained, we weren't sure what cavities they were allowed to search, our ears, our nose. We missed our flight, we missed our gender. It was final boarding call, and we couldn't hear. We're still here, and they say our attitude has altitude. Woof. Our photo ID from when we were wolves. The girl in California, we yearn to see her like the image of mountains scooped by a spoon. We'd show you selfies of our anus after the Tijuana donkey show if it meant the plane's safety. Please let us go, let us fly higher than fireworks in July to see the clouds and dress in heaven. Our gender was against the law, but so was your God. Yes, Jesus was trans. Her hair, her dress, Jesus was trans. How the Roman state crucified her in public. And then I will close out with 2 more. This poem, I was thinking about the pharmaceutical industrial complex's relationship to prisons and policing. It's from a friend of mine. It's called Schizophrenic Fucker. In this poem, I guess in all of my work, I hope that when I have titles like Schizophrenic Fucker, my friends, whatever, I hope that everything is a veneration of lives as they've been thrusted to the outskirts by the state. So, damn, we love you, man. We found you in some cheap motel with a fainted neon tea. We found you cackling in an open field, cracking skies open like lightning with your laughter. We found you. We found your arms tattooed with our poems because we were the only poets you know, because you loved how we always looked for you or found you walking with your asthmatic dog that wasn't yours anymore, walking beside railroad tracks before curfew at the sober living house, walking with that meth head and her 3 kids. Why are you yelling at them? And mom said they aren't allowed over anymore. Or were you walking back to prison? Or what was your cell phone number again? Or we stood in the garage asking your mom when she saw you last. Or we cried in a minivan feeling like a stupid bitch. And we couldn't find you under our fingernails. We couldn't find you asking anorexics for dieting advice. We couldn't find you anywhere. And we remember you before the prescription drugs that led to non-prescription drugs. how it surfed alongside dolphins, wave dancing on our backs, how California clams would hang on pillars of the pier, how many false goodbyes before we said goodbye. Where are you? Goodbye. And this will be my last poem. To close it out, this is a 40-page poem. This poem, it's called Diaries. Well, the book is called Diaries of a Terrorist, and this poem is called The Terrorist Shaped His Beard. After Cecilia Vicuña and Lady Non-Soldier. The root of terrorism is terror, etymologically derived from the Spanish word tierra, meaning land. Or maybe the root of terrorism is error, etymologically derived from the Greek meaning to be incorrect. Or maybe we err in the etymology. Maybe we're wrong to think terrorism means one who exists incorrectly on this land. In Spanish, the word terrorism becomes terrorismo, terremoto is a slant rhyme, and an earthquake, the shaking of the land. He changes the suffix, and the word becomes a verb, terrorizing. For example, police are terrorizing our people. Or in its past tense, the word becomes terrorized. For example, on this land, our people were terrorized by police, by ICE. Is it only writers who obsess over punctuation? The question mark, so cute in its curiosity. Question, who do we call a terrorist? Why? Right. Thank you so much, and I think we have time for a couple of questions.
Thank you. Really incredibly moving, especially those poems, boxing and all that about the dog really kind of talking back. So I'm having a bit of a hard time collecting my thoughts, but I did sort of plan a question, so I might as well ask it. Ever since our class day and the conversation, I wanted to sort of ask you more specifically about poets' role as part of their community, representing their community, and if there comes a time that not that pushing against the community is okay and is necessary, or is the poet's role to simply represent what they and their community are feeling at the moment?
I think no community is monolithic. So however we define the group, whether it's survivors or Latinos, Central Americans, everyone is different. So in any group, you're going to be pushing against your quote community, and even in abolitionist spaces. So you have some abolitionists who are abolition tomorrow, and, or ask for incremental abolitionism. And then you have the rest of us who are no, that's just reform. How about abolition now? And so I think, I'm always working with and pushing against my community, and my community is pushing against me too. And I think that idea of pushing against maybe it feels broad as I say it out loud, because sometimes it's working with and co-building and co-educating and keeping accountable and informing people, and that's what's pushing. Like I said, I was telling Carlos earlier, I was the instances where I've been problematic have been, as I look back, where I didn't know and I was, ignorant, and it was a learning curve, and sometimes, people were okay, now you're gonna learn. And I'm thankful for that retrospectively, that they helped me learn. And sometimes, when I'm problematic, it's been a byproduct of anxiety and PTSD that I didn't know how to navigate it, and as a bad survivor, I was mean. So I think that quote bad survivor. We chatted about that earlier. So I think that there's different ways of pushing back, and there's so many differences within community.
But is being problematic always a bad thing?
Problematic? I don't think, I mean, how I broke it down, how I identify with me being problematic, no. I mean, I think we're all problematic to various degrees, and then we all kind of just define like our boundaries to be like, all right, like, I still fuck with Azalea Banks. Like, you know, she hasn't crossed that threshold of like problematic for me. I'm still gonna buy tickets to her concert. And then my homies with like love and politics, you know, I could still respect, and like I still respect would be like, Azalea Banks crossed the line. Like that's too problematic for me. So I think we have different work as far as like what our boundaries are, of what's problematic enough or not problematic or whatever. So I think we're all just negotiating our boundaries and keeping those quote accountable, or trying to help each other grow and love and learn when we stumble. Yeah. Did you?
Oh, sorry, I was just like, but I'm just nodding along, so yeah.
Yeah, I always love the soft abolitionist. Where we're always like stumbling, and then I'm like, I'm sorry. And then they kind of just like lift you up, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, come on, do better. And you're like, all right, I'll try. And you keep on moving. Because if you're in the movement for your life, and that's how I view it, it's like life, it's lifelong work. You know, you're gonna mess up a lot. I mess up, and I'm gonna keep messing up. I just hope I could be graceful with others as a graceful.
I have a question about a punk literary aesthetic, because one of the things that, because I think my punk and your punk are probably different, right? Different generations of punk, but for me, one of the things that I loved about punk was a kind of seriousness. Do you know what I mean? And it had humor, right? But it was like I know bullshit. I'm serious about this fucked up world, and that baseline. Right,
Yeah.
I think that works in in what you're doing as well, right?
Yeah.
Alongside the humor and the like play and the perversity, right? There's also a seriousness that for me, I guess also in like after the sort of optimism and idealism of the '60s, right, which I was a little kid for, it felt so fresh, right? It felt so like, you know, like. It's not gonna work for us all to hold hands, right? Like sometimes you just want to hit someone, you know, whether you do or you don't is another thing. But I'm curious, just to hear a little more about this punk literary aesthetic,
Yeah,
and also like I think all of us know where we could find it in culture and music, right? But in literature.
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California, in the smell in downtown LA, it's like an all-ages punk venue. It's my safe haven. And like growing up as a teen and being able to just have like hot closeted guys throwing their body all over you and get at the smell is like really formative. And cool, I think we got some other Angelinos here. And I think about it, at that time, even there was a lot of hardcore kids. And then there was punks, whatever. But I hung out with like the grindcore and the power violence kids. And we were like, there was two of us, there was me and Jessica. We kind of were just like, sure, we'll go to the hardcore show, like fucking like, oh god. And then, you know, Melt Banana or XBXRX or the Locust or some girls would come into town, and it'd just be me and Jessica and all of like the hardcore kids would, you know, not join us, but we'd have all our little like grindcore and power violence community around. So bands, like a lot of those bands were off 31G Records, which is out of San Diego, that Justin Pearson helped form, were really important to me. And so when I was trying to understand my poetic voice, I would just look at all these bands like Brown Unicorn Horns, and I'd read their lyrics, and I'd look at their song titles, and I'm just like, this is literature. This is so good. So like with Locust, you have poems like anything Jesus could do, I could do better. Or can we get another nail in the coffin of culture theft? Like 30 cents shy of a quarter. Like these are like this is great literature of like these small little San Diego punk bands. So outside of that scene, what was really important to me was we talked about like agitprop poetry and literature in the 1920s, so the early Soviet Union. So writers like Mayakovsky that had this blend of, very leftist, rhetorically based work that was also so imagistically, sonically, formally, like beautiful. I think were really fun. Obviously, Latin American tradition. Yeah. All right, I think I have time for maybe one more. This is the first time I'm reading for this book, so it's also, because it's not out yet, so I'm like trying to figure out what was working and what doesn't work, so you could give me workshop notes afterwards. So that it eventually comes into the world. There was one question back there.
I didn't mean to tell you that I had a question. It's not fully a question. It's like, the work is so beautiful, and I'm struck by the fact that, like identity-wise, it seems like the subject is formed by violence in a lot of instances.
Mm.
And I'm wondering, if there's like, if you have concerns about that or ways that you're navigating that consciously so that it's not, like how you know you're not reinscribing or glamorizing something. You know what I mean?
I think there's like little moments, like the line where I have like this beckons the question of Austrian Indian literature, like how do we like say this without like reiterating or re-triggering or traumatizing. So I have little moments that I'm trying to look at it like that. But I also think like in aftermath of domestic violence, like this was my book where I was trying not to write about it. And then right now I'm writing a novel. And I was like, about indigo production in El Salvador and mediums. And the first thing that I did was I killed off the dad. In like the first chapter, I was like, nothing about my dad. Like he's dying in the first page. So I find it not right from his perspective. And then what happened was the whole book became about me yearning for a father figure. And I was just like, how do you do it? So I think there's like certain there's certain lines where I try to question like the reiteration of violence, but I think also I don't know how to not centralize it if you're like a non-binary Central American survivor talking about policing. So I think I'm okay with that. And I think also because central to like this conversation, for me, coinciding with like violence and policing is one of the functions that I want from this manuscript, is that we could start thinking about non-carceral solutions to violence. So I think what happens a lot of times is survivors' narratives kind of get co-opted as a way to augment policing budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So I think kind of what's beautiful here is that you have like a life filled with so much, sex and lack of joy and love, and also violence. And in that, the main framework which I try to position the book in is through one of abolition. So it's as if saying like, this story isn't for you to augment your police budget. Like this is someone who's like experienced these very iterations of living. And what I'm calling for is for us to think of solutions to violence that do not involve prisons and police. I like that one. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate your time. Hope you have a good night.
As always, we have our refreshments downstairs, our reception. Thank you all. And if you come back in May, we'll have books to sign, right?
Yes, May 3rd.